I bid you welcome.
Wow, you painted a very, very dark and depressing picture there, Ben. What do you think?
Well, it does look that way. I mean, it's the bill which Theresa May put to Parliament, that is the EU deal, was deliberately designed to be as unpalatable as possible. It was she spent a long time working this out. It's known as the Chequers draft, and she worked it out with the other cabinets, scraped through the European Commission. But essentially, it would be the most awful thing in the world. It would basically keep Britain in the EU, but in all but name, with much fewer rights than the existing member states. The MPs rejected it, and they were right to reject it, and Theresa May wanted them to reject it, because now she's back to square one. We're all back to square one. She has to start again. This is something that they've been doing since the referendum. They've been desperately throwing every spanner in the work they can in this process. And in the end, what they want is the situation where they say, look, this is just too difficult. We can't do this. and then, of course, the public will say, look, this is just going on too long. It's just too much trouble. Could we just forget this whole Brexit thing, please?
So
that's what they want to happen. For example, I'll give you a good example, Gareth. The backstop. Now, this is to do with the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, which has existed for 100 years.
Uh-huh.
It was set up, and it's functioned perfectly well. I mean, it's basically an open border. It's almost like people treat it as if it's not there, really. It even runs through some villages, even through some houses, and people just act as if it's not there. You get like people. There's no checks or anything. During the Troubles, there were army checkpoints somewhere along it, but basically it's been open the whole time. So it has gone through a number of changes. For example, in 1947, Ireland left the British Commonwealth, because originally Ireland was a Commonwealth state, with the Queen as head of state. They became the Irish Republic in 1947. And guess what happened with that border? Absolutely nothing. Everything was fine. Things were sorted out. I mean, obviously they were dealing now with a non-Commonwealth country. But you know what? Because it was in everyone's interest to do it and everyone was absolutely fine about it, they just sorted out a few bilateral trade deals. They made some arrangements and everything went back to normal. But suddenly, for the first time ever, for some reason, this border is an incredibly difficult impediment. It's causing no end of trouble. But the fact of the matter is, the trouble it's causing has been trouble that's been deliberately engineered. It's been set up that way.
Uh-huh.
That's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So, I don't think we're going to get a Brexit, but by not having a Brexit, it's going to be so obvious what they're doing. Other countries are going to see this as well.
Right.
They're going to see Britain. They're going to see how difficult it is when a major nation chooses to leave the EU, and they're going to see a lot. And the EU is falling apart as it is now anyway. All across Eastern Europe, from Poland to Austria, there are anti-EU governments. Italy's now going against it. There's a rising force in France against it, including the Yellow Vest protests and things like that.
Right.
So pretty soon there's going to be nothing left to leave. And the very fact that the government has tried so hard and fought so hard to keep us into this dying union is just going to be so obvious to everyone that they can't pretend anymore. And that's great. We finally have some honesty.
The thing that tipped me off at the beginning of this, when it first happened, and everyone voted to leave, was when they came out and said, "Oh shit! Well, we don't have a plan for that. We have no plan." And the minute they said that, I knew that some shit was going down, because there is no fucking way on heaven or earth that those motherfuckers, if it was legit, wouldn't have a plan to take Britain out of the EU if the vote went that way. There is no fucking way they wouldn't have a contingency plan. There's no way. Companies do this. You always say, oh, look, well, this is what we're planning to do. But if it doesn't work, what do we have as a backup plan? And they work on that before they even announce that they're going to have a fucking election. They have these plans in place. And the fact that they came out and said, well, we don't have a plan, we thought we'd win, was immediate to me. Red flag, something is going on here. Something shady is going the fuck on.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they do have a plan. It's called Article 50. I mean, it's strange that there didn't seem to be any problem getting Britain into the European Union. They found that very difficult. It was like it was basically a nice downhill run, no problems at all. It went smooth as ice. They have something called Article 50, which is the process by which a member state can become independent. And indeed, it was used for Greenland. Now, Greenland is a different matter because Greenland is actually a protectorate of Denmark. It's actually an overseas territory of Denmark. But that still is, but it left the EU. The reason, like I said, the reason they Article 50 is not working at the moment because the people who are actually entrusted to make it work don't want it to, and they're desperately sabotaging it. That's why this is all happening. All the fear, all the threats of economic Armageddon. The food not being delivered, the army on standby to in the event of a no-deal Brexit to deliver essential medical supplies, as if we're about to be hit by a comet or a nuclear bomb.
It's fucking nonsense.
This is, it's all fear-mongering. And any disasters that come about from this will be ones engineered by the saboteurs. Mm-hmm. There's absolutely no reason why Britain cannot have a working economic relationship as an independent state with its European neighbours. We've been doing this since prehistoric times, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
They don't want it. They want to keep us in. And they're desperately trying to do it. And
so
I can sense.
Is there going to be a second referendum? Are they going to have another vote?
I think they're going to have to, and this time they're not going to make the mistake they made last time. They're going to rig it good and proper, and the Remain side will win. There's no doubt about it. There'll probably be more than two options now. There'll be like a customs union or a no deal or just reversal of Article 50. And I think the reversal of Article 50 will win. They'll do everything they were going to do. They'll half-heartedly in the first referendum. But they're going to do properly this time.
Isn't this going to destroy the public's faith in democracy? And I know that most people don't give a rat's ass anyway, but those that do, if they have a second vote, it's like, well, what's the fucking point? I'm never voting again. This is a fucking goof.
This is why it can only come out well for us in the end.
Yeah.
Because cancelling Brexit is going to be the most. It is the most obvious situation where there is manipulation from on high and contempt for the people. It's just so obvious, Kath. It's in your face. No one can deny it.
Right.
It's absolutely wonderful.
So there was a clip from Sky News with this guy, a Remainer, was confronted by those who want to leave. And he was very eloquent, I thought, in what he said. And I'm going to play it right now. And we'll talk about his thoughts. Listen to this.
But you know what, Kate? I hear time and time again that the Vote Leave campaign was nasty and it was divisive. But I think actually if the people in that gilded chamber in there turn round to people and say, you got it wrong, vote again, people will quite rightly be as angry as I am right now that we're even having this discussion. Millions of people voted for the very first time in Britain's biggest democratic exercise. If we turn around to them and say, you're stupid, you've got it wrong, we want you to vote again until we get the right result, they will quite rightly turn around and punch our parliamentarians in the nose and say to them, do you know what, I'm not putting up with this a moment longer. And we will unleash forces in this country that have not been seen since the 30s. They are playing with fire.
Like what?
Populism on the left and the right. It will be completely awful. These people do not know what they're dealing with. I just can't understand why Brussels, being tied to Brussels, is more important than the principles of democracy. We are the home of the Westminster Parliament. We've exported that around the world. We are the home of John Locke. We have exported democracy around the world. But to turn around to people, 17.4 million of them, and say, actually, no, you got it wrong, I think would be incredibly damaging.
Oh, well, there you have it, Ben.
That man talking. I've seen this clip. That man talking is a former Remain voter. He's actually an Asian guy. He's not white. He doesn't drive a white van. He's an educated guy. He's Asian, and he says it all. He says absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Why? And he's asked a good question. Why is it a bit more important for the government to have us attached to Brussels than to respect normality? The reason is because the EU is such an important part of the New World Order agenda. And this is why they got rid of Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher, this Iron Lady, who everyone saw as a strong, powerful leader, was removed with frightening ease. Whether you support her or not, whatever you think of her policies, and it doesn't matter. The very fact is we had essentially a bloodless coup in Britain. She was removed not through a vote, not in the way that Theresa May was going to be removed, through a vote of no confidence, but through dirty tricks within her party. Why? Because she was against the EU, and the party. This Iron Lady turned out to be a paper dolly, and she was kicked out in no time at all once they realised she wasn't going through with the agenda.
Right.
So, yeah, it's incredibly important to the powers that be that we stay attached.
Yeah, I mean the way I look at it, or anyone that's into freedom, I mean, when you have a democratic vote and the people say we want to do this, that's end of story.
It should be, but of course,
there's nothing else
this
to
isn't
talk
the first
about,
time.
right? I mean, whether you know, ultimately, I don't give a fuck whether you stay in the EU or leave. I don't care. But if you vote and the majority says leave, you leave. That's all there is to it.
So.
That's all there is fucking to it.
Yeah. Well, you see, they are essentially saying, as that man said, no, we asked for your opinion, but you gave the wrong answer. And this is what actually someone was quoted, a member of the EU Commission, I think it was Jacques Delors, or one of these people in the EU Commission, back in the days of the Maastricht Treaty. This was in the 80s. And a number of countries actually rejected it. Denmark, Luxembourg, a couple of others. Actually, they had referendums, and these referendums were rejected. And the first thing they did was they set up a second referendum, and Delors said, we're going to keep on having referendums until we get the answers we want.
Uh-huh.
And so you have to say, well, why have referendums at all because they're obviously just a hoax? Right. And the answer is yes, they're a hoax. They're there just like the European Parliament is, to make people think that they're free when they're not. The European Parliament is set up to make the European Union look like a free voting democracy, when in fact it's just there for show. The EU members of the EU Parliament are overpaid, overfed, pampered fools who just talk for 2 minutes at a time in an assembly that has no legislative power. They have to approve all the bills of the EU Commission, but once those bills are approved, they can't be repealed, they can't be amended. The EU Commission has all the say. The EU Commission is the only people who can propose the bills. MEPs can't propose bills; they can only vote them down. That makes it very, very different from your Congress or from our Parliament, where you're a member of Congress. You see, your congressional representative, you can write to him or her, and he or she can produce bills, and they have a bit of clout.
Right.
The MEPs have no clout at all, nothing. It's just for show. It's a fraud.
Oh my gosh.
Yep,
well, we got, when is it? March 29th is the D-Day, I guess. When
it's the day where we're supposed to leave the European Union, but we will not.
Yeah, some
they'll have an
down.
extension. It'll begin with an extension, which may go on for several years. Before they have some kind of second referendum or some backtrack, and they'll just say, look, this is too difficult, we can't do it. We're going to have to cancel Article 50 and stay in.
Yeah,
and that'll be great. I mean, it's going to be wonderful. They're delaying that as long as possible. They're dragging it out as long as possible because they know that once they say that, and they have to say that, everyone is going to know. And that man in this clip was absolutely right. People are going to go nuts. There's going to be a massive protest. I mean, I'll be involved myself, quite frankly, but I'll be doing it from the position. I'll be doing it from the position of, I believe, knowledge of what's really going on.
Well, I'm intrigued to see how this plays out because it's truly fascinating. You know, even though I'm not involved in any way, shape, or form, just from the outside looking in, it's completely fascinating to see.
It is, isn't it?
This wonderful theatrical piece play itself out to whatever conclusion it comes to.